Hello everybody, I am Shepels, and welcome back to Let's Play Alien Shooter 2 Reloaded. So, we are going to find out why the generator is malfunctioning, and then as a side mission, we also have to find a transformer for your man Nicholas. And I believe that with the transformer, I don't know if it's with his side quest in this level or the next one, he makes the freeze ray, or the freeze gun, which you'll remember from the first Alien Shooter. It was in that as well, but it's a little bit different. It acts more like a flamethrower in this one as opposed to what it did in the first.
Just great, the sector is flooded. You'll need to get the water pumps going in order to start the main generator.
As opposed to what it was like in the first Alien Shooter. Now this is where things start to get a little bit more complicated. Now if you remember, I didn't bother upgrading my shotgun because I don't feel that it's 100% necessary here. Generally I'd be able to get through this with this shotgun as opposed to, you know, being forced to upgrade. But with that said, we wouldn't want to go too much further without upgrading it. So we will be upgrading it soon enough. Now these things are a little bit awkward because they can be a bit hard to notice in the water. But, well, unfortunately you just kind of have to manage. You can't sort of help the fact that they're there in the water. Now this is a secret area, but we can't get into it yet. We have to basically get rid of all the water first, and then once you've done that, you also have to be really careful in this area, and I've done it I don't know how many times, but there's actually barrels in the water and they're barely visible, and you can easily be right in front of one, shoot an explosive barrel, and boom, there's a life gone already. And right now, after that, we had a bit of a disaster in the last level when we got that ambush. I can't really afford to be losing any more lives than I already have, because, you know, I'm going to be needing them later on. But, you know, it's not too bad, you know, because we're still early on in the game, so there's plenty of chances to find extra lives. The only problem with extra lives is that it's like any other drop from a monster. It's completely random. You know, you're not going to. It's like the first level where I got like 3 extra lives in one level, and I might never get that again. There you go. There's an example of barrels being in the water and you can't see it. But that's kind of the way that it works. With extra lives, you're not going to be able to always have them. Now I'm looking like I'm going to have to run back and get more ammunition for my shotgun because I'm looking a little bit low. See, some of the barrels they're not sitting up; they sort of lie down, and it's practically impossible to see them in this sort of grungy water. So you really have to be on your guard in this level, because otherwise you're just going to end up blowing yourself up time and time again. And there's one particular part in this, and again it's because of lack of maneuverability. And it can be a bit tough because there's a monster in this, and it's got breath like a flamethrower, and if it gets anywhere close to you and it hits you with that breath, it'll just absolutely destroy you, particularly in impossible difficulty. It'll rip through your armor and it'll rip through your health in no time. You'll be dead in about 2-3 seconds without a problem. So you have to be really, really cautious in this level. Again, the reason I had such a disaster last time was because I was confined with space. I had a room that was only about the size of this room here. In case you didn't watch watched the previous episode. But that's kind of the way that it kind of goes, though. You get you get sort of instances like that, but you don't get many of them. I find that you get more of them at the start of the game as opposed to later on in the game. Now, I'm running very, very low on shotgun ammo here, so I'm going to have to run back, which is not an unusual thing for this level. I believe I've had to do it plenty of other times with this level, so it isn't something that's new to me. I'm going to run back now because I've only got 33 shells left, so I may just go back up here and just run back to the shop. But it's here that the difficulty ramps up a little bit because they bring in new enemies that aren't quite so forward. It's not quite as basic as it used to be. You'll also remember as I go along, and if you watched my Zombie Shooter 2, I was giving out about how they were technically copy and pasting a levels, and you'll see if you've watched my Zombie Shooter 2, you'll see in some of the later levels why I say that, because you'll kind of recognise it straight away, but you would have to have watched my Zombie Shooter 2 Let's Play to actually sort of pick it out. Unless you watch this first, then watch it, you'll know exactly what I mean by the fact that they copy and pasted levels in Zombie Shooter 2. I don't know what went wrong with Zombie Shooter 2 for them. I really don't. I mean, as I'm playing this now, I can already see that the difficulty was really ramped up in Zombie Shooter 2. Despite the fact that I didn't have too much trouble with difficulty in the early stages of Zombie Shooter 2. I was pretty good. It was just a couple of levels that I had some difficulty with. The main ones being the one where I had to find or I had to blow up that warehouse, and then the other one I had difficulty with was the one where you had 8 minutes and you had to deactivate all the explosives. Those were the two main ones, and then of course the final level where they used that same really horrible thing that they did with the boss in the Alien Shooter expansion, which was they pitch you against this big ass boss, and then they just pitch you against like an unlimited supply of minions, where they just keep on spawning more and more and more and more and more and more. There's just no end to them.
Find and activate the backup generator.
Oh shit, Sherlock. And they kind of just went a little bit AWOL with their final boss in Zombie Shooter 2. Was the boss in this one is a lot different, as you'll see. The difficulty is not as high in this either. Even in impossible mode, it's not as high. You'll have a much easier time in this than you would in Zombie Shooter 2. Because I remember, I said this in one of the previous episodes of this as well. There was one of the early bosses in Zombie Shooter 2. If you had no arm, one of the early enemies, sorry, not one of the early bosses. One of the early enemies would take about 70 health off you with one hit. And that was just, excuse me, I've got a bit of a tickle in my throat at the moment. It'd take about 70 health off you with just one hit if you didn't have armor on you, and that was the running, the normal running fast zombie. It didn't even have guns or anything on it. It was kind of like almost like one of the starter enemies in this. And I just took 70 damage off it straight away, which was a real WTF situation for me, because I was like, why? Like, I said, I know this is in fucking impossible, but why would it take that much health off me in one smack? It's only upon doing the Let's Play and getting to the final boss in Impossible, that I kind of realised, hang on a second, the damage has really been you know, the damage that enemies do have really been ramped up. And I was right, it has been, because now that I'm going back and playing this, because this game was before Zombie Shooter 2, the difficulty is a lot more balanced in this game than it was in Zombie Shooter 2. And as I've said before, I don't understand why, because all they had to do was just use the entire balancing system that they had in this and put it into Zombie Shooter 2, because it's the same engine, it'll be the same code. So I just don't understand why they had to ramp it up. And as I said, the boss fight is literally just pot luck. There's no skill involved anymore. Whilst this game is it's always been based on skill to a point, but when you have difficulty that has been ramped up to the point that it has been in Zombie Shooter 2, it just gets a little bit ridiculous. It gets to the point where it's just absolutely rage-inducing, and you just lose the fun out of the game altogether. It gets to the point where it's no longer fun, and that's pretty much what happened with Zombie Shooter 2. It just excuse me. It just lost all the fun for me at the end of it, because you didn't just have to kill the boss once, you had to kill him twice. And, you know, I've done it before on normal difficulty, because normal difficulty is pretty easy, but trying to beat him on Impossible was practically impossible, because he was doing huge amounts of damage to me, and then I had all his minions as well, which were technically pretty high-end endgame enemies as well on top of that. And even with the most powerful gun in the game, I was still struggling big time. I haven't been able to do it. I've tried it at least 20 times now, and it's just got to the point where it just got to the point where it annoyed me immensely. So I ended up just lowering the difficulty down to hard, and I just went from there and attempted to do it from there, because the Impossible just went too far. But I wouldn't have minded it if there was an end to his buddies coming to help him. But the fact that you had several hundred of them coming at you at a time, and every time you wiped out one, that you had 4 separate groups coming at you, and every time you wiped out one group, that group would respawn, so you were technically constantly having 4 groups of over 100 enemies coming at you at once. Like 100 enemies in total, like not 100 enemies in that one group. But it just got to the point where it was just complete overkill. And I just don't understand why they did it, because when my memory serves me correctly, they didn't use that particular move in this. Instead, they just pitted you against the boss and a lot of his buddies, but then you could, once you had all his minions killed, you know, that was it. It was just you versus him. There was no respawning or any of this bullshit. I think there might have been teleporters which brought enemies in, but I don't think there was any actual, you know, constant respawning. And it just completely killed off all the fun of the end of the game for me, because the game was pretty fun up until then. Like, despite the fact of all its weaknesses and everything else, it was still. Oh, there's those flamethrower guys I was telling you about with the acid breath. Like, the game was still fun, but despite all its weaknesses, but it was a major letdown, the end boss, because they just pulled off a dick move that they pulled in the expansion to the first Alien shooter, which was the first game that you had an actual official boss. And you know, it just didn't bode well with me at all. I just kind of went, no, this is just too much, you know. Because the thing about a game like this is you have to know your limits when you're making it. You know, you have to know your limits. Like when do you sort of pull the reins back a bit and say, hold on, maybe we're going a little bit over the top here with our enemies and that. You know, there has to be a limit. There's no point in pitting the player against just too many enemies, because it'll just get to the point where the player will just sort of say, right, I'm done. I'm not even going to try this anymore. And that's exactly what happened with me and the end of level boss and the end game boss in Zombie Shooter, Zombie Shooter 2. Excuse me. Sorry, I know I'm waffling on a bit. It's just I'm trying to concentrate here at the same time. But yeah, like, you know, when you're making an action shooter like this, that is where it's down to action, and you have to have that constant flow of action. You have to know your limit. You have to kind of just say, right, okay, I've kind of done enough now. There's enough enemies here now, and you know, like if I put any more in, the player's not going to be able to manage. And you need to find that balance. And if you don't, then you get an end boss like what you got in Zombie Shooter 2, and it didn't work. Let's just put it that way and leave it at that. Whereas with this, it did it in a nice way where you had huge amounts of room, and you had, you know, I'm not going to spoil it too much, but you had huge amounts of room to maneuver, and you only had a set amount of minions to kill, as opposed to a constant onslaught that never ends. So it made it a lot easier, as you will see for yourself once I get there. Now, unlike Zombie Shooter 2, this also has an extra 2 levels, but that was only in this one. There was only 17 levels in the reloaded version. Vengeance only had 15, and the reason for that is that basically the community made a wish list of what they would have liked to have seen in Zombie Shooter 2. Or sorry, Alien Shooter 2. And with that, they decided, well, some people like how Vengeance turned out, and then there was the sort of the group that were hardcore Alien Shooter 1 that wanted it to be a little bit more like Alien Shooter 1, and so they made this version, which is reloaded, and it basically dumbs down the game's RPG elements to only your stats, as opposed to having weapon skills and everything else. And one of the big things that the community asked for was extra levels, so they put 2 extra levels into the reloaded version. So there's actually 17 levels in this, as opposed to 15 like there was in Vengeance and Zombie Shooter 2. And so this one's going to take me a little bit longer than Zombie Shooter 2 did, because there's 2 extra levels. But apart from that, the game is not that much different from Zombie Shooter 2. Right, I'm going to run back and get some more ammo. I know I'm doing a lot of backtracking here, which is unusual for me in a shooter game, but this is one of those levels that you kind of have to, because there's going to be a big onslaught up here where I'm just going to get a big massive wave of enemies. And the problem is when I come back down here, there'll be more down here too, so I have to basically stock up now. I'm going to repair my armor too. Sorry, I'm going to have a drink because get rid of this tickle. Hopefully that'll do the job. But yeah, if you're ever if you're watching this and you're thinking of making a game like this, know the limits, because in a game like this you can very easily go too far with the enemies, and that's not good. You have to know the limits, because you can very easily get to a point where you just completely overwhelm the player with your enemies, and then the game is no longer fun for the player, because you're just, as it is, you're constantly pitted against odds that are completely inhumanly possible to survive. And then if you're going to go pitting them against something that's even more impossible, it's going to be impossible, especially on a difficulty like impossible. Right, I'm just going to go do that now. We're going to run back again. Sorry about all the backtracking, but it's the only way I'm going to be able to do this. But I like the balancing of the impossible difficulty on this game, because it's not as extreme as it was in Zombie Shooter 2. It's a lot more kind of a relaxed state, I suppose, because I've gotten so far when it came to Zombie Shooter 2 that this is almost like a picnic at the moment for me, because of just how tough it was in comparison to this. So in a way I probably should have played this one first. But because it is easier, without a doubt it's easier. I've noticed that already. Even this sort of early stage in the game, I've noticed the difficulty difference between this and Zombie Shooter 2. Alright. But as I said, like, until Zombie Shooter 2, Sigma Team had a fantastic record. I couldn't fault any of their games, really. I faulted the expansions for Alien Shooter 1 a little bit, as you'll see from my review, because they were short and they didn't really offer much in the way of actual, expansion material, other than more levels and a bit of a continuation of the story. But that was about it, of what little story was there. There was never any new weapons or anything like that introduced. There was no new enemies introduced until the second expansion, and even then there was only 2 of them, and they've been used since in this. So yeah, there wasn't really much there. Expansions have been Sigma Team's strong points, that's for sure. So it's probably why there hasn't been really any expansions since. It's probably why they haven't done anything in the way of expansions much since then. I just felt that it was kind of their weak point. So, and maybe they figured that out themselves, and they just said, right, well, obviously it is our weak point, so we'll just stick to what we're good at. And that's fair enough, and they've done pretty good with that up until Zombie Shooter 2. That was definitely their first disaster. Like, even their games that weren't a part of the shooter series, like Cax Temple and that other one, they were pretty decent games. Even if they weren't, they were a completely different audience target. They were just completely different games in general. But they were still good games in their own right for what they were aimed for what they were supposed to do. They were nevertheless still like really good games. So yeah, I couldn't fault them. I thought that they were still good games. They were still fun games. They were, you know, I just think that they've had maybe one bad run with Zombie Shooter 2. It's disappointing, and I'm hoping that's the end of it now. And you know, I am going to try out their newer games, which is, I think one, as I've said before, I think one's called Alien Hallways or Alien Syndrome or something like that, and the other one's called I Am Weapon. As their two new ones are completely different to this. So I'm hoping that kind of Zombie Shooter 2 is kind of their, I think, to be honest, it was maybe their time to stop and do something new, because you can only keep a series going for so long, and the AAA industry have done this for too fucking long, where they've kept game series going for too long to the point that they just fucking lose all that made the original games good in the first place. The Silent Hills have done it, the Resident Evils have done it. You know, they've just done it and done it again and again and again, and it was kind of the same with other series. I mean, Army of Two was a brilliant game. I know it was primarily co-op, and I'm not a co-op person very much, but I thought that Army of Two was a great game. The first one was brilliant, and then 40th Day came out. 40th Day was not a great game, and then Devil's Cartel is supposed to be even worse. One of my friends now, I was talking to him a couple of months ago. I bumped into him, and he was saying that he got Devil's Cartel. He was the one guy I did play co-op Army of Two with, and he was a huge Army of Two fan, and he called it, thought that it was really, really bad. Like Army of Two was one of those games that I think it was good, and they should have just left it at that. They shouldn't have tried the whole thing to keep it going and making sequel after sequel. Because I liked the few new additions in Army 2 40th Day, but I just thought that they changed the characters too much in 40th Day. Like Army of Two was funny. It had very sort of slapstick kind of comedy to it, and they kind of lost that with Tyson Rios and Elliot Salem in 40th Day. They lost what made the audience love the two characters in the first place. It was completely two different, completely different voice actors as well for it, which I noticed from the very, very get-go. I knew well that it wasn't the same voice actors, and with the change of the voice actors, it was like they changed the. It's like they changed the characters as well. They just, and I don't really understand why. I don't think I still understand. I still don't understand it today. But they just changed the voice actors, and then it's like the actual game characters themselves got changed with it. And it's, you know, I think Army of Two would have been a great once-off game, but the AAA industry don't think like that anymore. The AAA industry actually don't start a series anymore unless they know 100% that they can make a sequel, and that's pretty fucking bad. Like, I mean, there's what's that new game that's out now? That's on PS4. I think it's Watch Dogs or something like that. They would not. I can't remember who it was that admitted it, but someone in the company anyway turned around and said we wouldn't start developing Watch Dogs without knowing that we're going to do a sequel to it. So they've pretty much already said we're going to do a sequel to it, and the game's only just been practically released. And that's the way the AAA industry is gone. There's no such thing as once-off games anymore. Another good example of that was, if you remember back on the PS1, and it was probably one of my favourite titles on the PS1, it was Medieval, where you played as a knight that was brought back from the dead. His name was Sir Daniel Fortescue, and it was a brilliant game. It was really fun to play, and it had some great humour in it. And that was originally intended to be a once-off, I think, but they actually went on to make a sequel, and it was very disappointing. The sequel was massively disappointing. They did it because
the water has been pumped out. Now go for the main generator.
I think they did it because there was just a huge cry for a sequel to be made, and to be honest with you, I couldn't see them pulling off a sequel. They pulled it off, but it wasn't good. It was rather poor compared to the standards of Medieval. Like, the level design was not good. Just the whole game, all the new characters they brought into it, the new bad guy and everything. It didn't blend in together into this whole kind of steampunk kind of time, you know, where guns were starting to come out and muskets, things like that. And it just didn't work. It lost what was magical about the first one. You know, it was a pure example of a game that should have just been a once-off and left it at that. But you know, it's kind of just the way that it goes. I mean, there are some games that are just meant to be once-offs, and I'm completely up for games that are just one-offs, because like, you know, you might get this feeling at the end of a game where you're like, oh, I wish it didn't have to end, and you kind of say, well, it would be nice if they continued it on with a sequel, but at the same time you have to think, well, maybe if they made a sequel it might ruin it, and 9 times out of 10 it does. And so I've kind of learned as I've got older that sometimes once-off games are much better than having a disappointing sequel, because it kind of loses what made the first game so magical for you in the first place, and that's just kind of the way that it goes. But Medieval was a fantastic game, and I might look into maybe getting an emulator of it one day and doing a let's play of it. As I've spoken about before, I believe that there is nothing wrong with using emulators as long as there's fair use put into it as well, such as you did own the game originally if you don't already actually bought the game, or at least it was bought for you as a present. Then I'm kind of, you know, I'm a bit more lenient, and I might say, well, if that's the case, then okay, maybe, you know, there's nothing wrong with using an emulator. You know, but that's my that's my vision on. I'm sorry, I'm going to go get a bit more ammo again. But that's my opinion on emulators. I think it's okay to use them assuming that you've already bought the game, or it was bought for you at some stage. Like, I'd never emulate a game that I have never owned, because, you know, you're basically, you know, it's almost stealing someone's work. Like, I wouldn't, like, as me, someone that is looking to make games and have already started making one, I wouldn't like someone to you know, to just emulate that and not put a cent towards the fact of how much work had gone into it. You know, like you gotta eat. So yeah, I have that's my opinion on emulators. But I might do one of Medieval if I can one of these days. But right now my Let's Play list is just full. I have so many Let's Plays to do yet. The main reason for that actually is because I've kind of always lingered around GOG on a weekly basis. GOG is my main online source of getting games. I only use Steam if I really have to. And GOG have had a number of sales over the years, over the past year or two. And like last year they had no, it's not in there. Last year they had the Insomnia sale, where for about 48 hours they had dozens and dozens of games that were like 90% off, 75% off, things like that. And there's 2 secrets left. And I got an awful lot of my games off of that. And then they had the Time Machine DRM pre-sale earlier last year. I got another heap of games off of that as well. I got like, I'd say I got about 10, maybe more games for about €10. Or was it 20? For about €20 anyway, which is fucking bargain. As I'm sure anybody with the right mind frame would understand that that's a bloody bargain. And yeah, I've just gotten so many games through GOG because of their absolute ludicrous sales that I'm not short on games at all to do Let's Plays of. There's one secret around here somewhere and I can't think where it is, but I don't think I'm gonna go searching for it either. I used to know where all the secrets were, especially in the earlier levels of this game. But we've spent long enough at this level, so I'm not going to worry about it, I don't think. Yeah, there's one left, but oh, I have to find the transformer. Bollocks. I forgot about that. Shit, I may go find that transformer. I nearly forgot about that. But between that and already owning plenty of bloody games.
Power supply status active.
Yeah, good. But where's this? Oh, there's a transformer. I knew there was something there. But between GOG and their sales and all the games that I've accumulated over the years, and you know, I've often bought big massive boxes of games on eBay. Like, you know, I'm not short on Let's Plays at all for probably about 2 years, so you know, I've plenty to do without a doubt. That counted as a secret, did it? Oh no, it didn't. Or did it? Oh yeah, it did. Sorry, I was looking at mission objectives done. That's grand. Right, let's move on then, shall we? Okay. Let's go speak with Baker and give Nicholas the transformer. And then we'll go have a look in the shop. Right.
A transformer. Very good.
Very good.
Wait. Damn. It doesn't have a cooling block. You should be able to find one somewhere in the assembly workshop.
Goody.
The transformer won't work without it. Regardless, here, I owe you one.
Well, what did you give me? An implant. That's a pretty hefty looking implant too. Oh yes, I'm going to use that because it increases my damage too. Nice. Alright,
Glad you're
Baker.
back in one piece. Let's get started. Now the generator works, but access to the floor is still blocked. The system reset itself and dumped the access codes. We need to retrieve those codes. Magma has compartmentalized most of their computer systems. You have to go down to the main access computer in the laboratories. Move out, soldier. Get it done.
There it is, sir. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to sell that. I'm going to sell that. That's an... the problem is it's really slow fire. Fast and easy to use pistol making a good choice for beginners. I'm not a fucking beginner. I am awesome at my job. Am I taking a bit of a risk though? I could be taking a bit of a risk not wow. There, fucking implants. I might be taking a bit of a risk not upgrading my shotgun again. I'm not really sure about it at the same time. I think I'll leave it for now. I'll take a risk. But anyway, I'm going to leave it here for this part, guys. So thank you very much for watching. I hope that you've enjoyed the video. And as always, I'll see you in the next one. Thank you, and have fun.